have been blessed throughout my life to have the most insightful and wise theologian and teacher in my mother. Now, she's probably going to watch this later, so hi, Mom. In our 1970s bathroom that had the blue tile, you know exactly the tile I'm talking about, my mom would put on her makeup every morning, and I would sit there on a little stool, and I would ask her the big life questions. So most of my theological education actually happened in a little blue-tiled bathroom in Little Rock, Arkansas. But there you go. You take it where you can have it, right? So she would dot on her CoverGirl Beige 3 liquid foundation, and I asked her, Mom, I'm really confused about the promised land. In the Bible, it says that it's flowing with milk and honey, and that really just seems like a big mess to me. And, she would dot on her foundation and her powder, her pressed powder, and say, well, let's think about this. If we have milk and if we have honey, what else do we have? Well, first of all, we have bees. And if we have bees, we have flowers. And if we have flowers, we have seeds and pollen. And if we have milk, we have cows or sheep or goats and grass or grain and somebody to milk the cow and the sheep and the goats. And we have people who will harvest the honey and maybe plant some flowers or make sure that the flowers are cultivated well. We also have somebody who's going to clean up the poop, because these are messy endeavors, aren't they? So we have people in community with knowledge and cooperation and flowers and plants and clover and grain and grass and livestock. And we have places to keep those things. And we have people working in cooperation and community together. A land flowing with milk and honey, indeed. But then there's a lot of stars, isn't there? I mean, God says to Abraham, your descendants are like the number of stars. How does that work? And the grains of sand on the ocean. It works in a big, complicated, messy family. And my mom kind of used our own family as an example. Thanksgiving dinners were big and complicated, and usually somebody left the table in tears, and then they would come back. And Abraham's family was quite a lot like that, if you're reading the Bible carefully. And we are among those descendants. We are one of the stars. We are among the grains of sand. We are those descendants. We are the inheritors of the faith that Abraham had when he was looking out at that night sky, when he was promised this land and shown this vision of a city on a hill. We are the inheritors of the love that brought forth descendants from one who was as good as dead. We are the inheritors of that faith, that hope, that love, that abundance. The complexity and the joy of a land flowing with milk and honey. And then dotting on the bright blue Maybelline eyeshadow, Mom would make sure that I remembered this legacy, that I counted amongst those who inherit these gifts. And so do you. So do you, my friends. We have this amazing inheritance of abundance and faith and hope and love. And at this time in our life at All Saints, we have a chance to build up something new. And yeah, we've kind of had to deal with some of the poop. But we also have been given great abundance. Now, many of you have heard me say that churches are, one of the primary purpose of a church is to transform our lives to become more and more who we are called to be in our baptism into the body of Christ. Anybody heard that before? Yeah, you've heard this from me. That is, I think, the primary purpose of the church, is this transformation of hearts and minds and lives to become mature Christians. That doesn't stop there, though. We are called to that transformation so that we might look outward and see the world and bring the loving, transformative, powerful message of the gospel out into a world that is in such great need. And right now, we kind of like to pretend like the COVID pandemic is over. It just isn't. It's this strange thing that we're living with now. And our world has changed, permanently changed. And so we come back together after our time of isolation and look out at a world that is not the same as it was. Our families aren't the same. Our spirit isn't the same. Things are different. And the world remains in great need. It's a world divided. It's a world in conflict. It's a world rife with potential and possibility of new life, new ideas, new directions. And where do we fit in the midst of this season, in the world, here in this community, in LA? Where do we fit there? What is your hope for All Saints? What is your hope for our ministry as we are transformed and we seek to transform the world around us? So one idea of a church is that we're kind of like a base camp. We're kind of like a base camp where you're out on your journey in the world, whatever you're doing, whatever mountains you're climbing, trails you're running, work you're doing, and you come back here, and it's like a base camp where you're fed and replenished, and you have you're stocking back up for the trip you're taking next. Does that feel that way to you sometimes? I hope it does. I hope it does. We get refueled with bread and wine and music and connection and laughter and our relationships. But we don't come here for that purpose only. Of course we don't. This is also a training ground. Churches are kind of like training grounds where you come and you practice how to love one another, how to connect with people who are different than you. The church is one of the few places left in the world where there's no filter on who comes in the door, right? For better or for worse, there's no filter on who comes in the door. And we have this chance to really connect with people who are different than us and how to be curious with one another and connect. And what richness we have in that. It's a learning lab. It's a learning lab where we learn to pray. We learn to give. We learn the joys of ministry. We explore intellectually. It's a learning lab. It's a place where we can belong. In a world where belonging is sometimes so hard and so elusive, a church can be a place where you truly belong. So I ask you again, what are your hopes for All Saints right now? We have been given such an abundance, and the opportunity is so big to rebuild this church, to impact the world around us, in some ways it feels like there are no limits. And so I'm going to ask you this week in particular to think about what you hope for this place. What is it that you hope that we might build or do? What is the hunger that you know is out in the world that we can directly impact? For people come here for that transformation, for healing, for wholeness. And we have to be ready to act. Now, you might think about the gospel lesson in terms of end times, the second coming, but I'm going to tell you, I see it as more immediate than that. That on a dime, we can put together a service that celebrates the life of a loved one. On a dime, we can gather people together to feed the hungry, quickly responding to the needs around us. And we need to do more of that. We need to hone our capacity to know what is needed out in the world and what is needed in our church, and to be able to respond quickly and adeptly to those needs as a whole community. So my hope here is that we can continue this rebuilding and reconnecting, rejuvenating this church to respond to and address the hunger that is right here and transform the world that is outside our doors. I want to close with a final piece that's a little bit of a shift here. We have an abundance. We have all that we need. And we actually can do more, and we can hone our ability to respond and to connect and to rebuild. This is an amazing opportunity in the life of this church. And in our planning, as you all know, we incorporated a deficit into our budget. And we did that on purpose so that we could rebuild and reconnect and restaff and be ready when the need arose, so that we could be responsive as a church. Well, I'm telling you, our deficit's a little bit bigger than we planned for. It is. And our need here is clear. We need the members of the parish to make additional gifts for this year. And so I'm asking, and I'll be asking directly in other ways, for you to think about what additional gift that you might be able to give to this parish. Maybe it's prayer, and that is beautiful. Maybe it is service. So when you get an email, can you come help? Let's step on up. And maybe it is also financial. I am adding a gift of $10,000 to my offering to the church, and I'm doing that today. And it's going straight into the operating budget, which is kind of weird because that operating budget pays my salary, so I know that. But it's not about that. It's about my commitment to the ministry of this place. And I do want to ask each of you to think about, can you make a stretch gift? Can you stretch and offer a little bit more to the life and the ministry of the church this year? Because we do need it. Are we going to be okay? Absolutely. I've been working with our leadership team. I'm pulling in, trimming, cutting, negotiating, drawing things down as much as possible. But the direction of the parish is clear. We really want to grow. We want to do our ministries. We don't want to go into an austerity situation. So I'm leading us, I'm kind of drawing a fine line there. It would be a whole lot easier if we could have a few extra additional gifts. So it could be a little bit weird for you to hear what your priest is giving. And one of the things that's important to remember about the ordained life is that you live your faith out loud. And normally I'm a very private person. But I want this to be out loud because I think that you need to know where my commitment level is. It's a pinch, it's a stretch gift for me. A stretch gift for you may be $25, $30, $50, that's fine. But I ask you to make a stretch gift. And I hope that you will. And when you do that, I want you to think to yourself, this is an important place. This church is a place of healing and transformation and love. It is a place that witnesses to the resurrection of Christ, the capacity of us to change the world, and we have an opportunity now to rebuild and reconnect and renew our own church and the world around us. Let's be ready. Let's be ready when the call comes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.